Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our webinar today titled Asigra Cloud Backup for Office 365 Deployment Best Practices Revealed. Joining us today is Jose Freire, Technical Support Engineer at Asigra, who will be taking us through today's webinar. If you have any questions, please submit them using the widget on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And today's webinar is being recorded and will be available in the partner portal by tomorrow. If there are any topics that anyone would like us to cover in future webinars, please email marketing@asigra.com. Without any further ado, I'll hand it off to Jose.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. So here's the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to talk a little more about the Office, what is Office 365, about the Asigra backup strategy for Office 365, environment, the infrastructure recommendations, and of course we'll answer any kind of questions and show you some resources that are available as far as the best practices and the proper backup of the Office 365 environment. So let's take a look at what is Office 365. As you know, it is basically one of the most common platforms as far as a productivity applications. Things that we normally used to use on your desktop are now available in the cloud from anywhere in the world, so you can actually have a lot more productivity with applications such as Word, Excel, Outlook, Publisher, PowerPoint, and a few other tools that you normally would use on your desktop. But of course, the important thing is bringing a lot of well-enabled access to email, document sharing, calendars, and other devices to anywhere in the world. The idea behind Office 365 is bringing these resources to any company, any size, to anywhere. No need, of course, for heavy IT knowledge because everything is done by the Microsoft, so everything is available to any size of company to be able to have a complete, comprehensive cloud productivity application management. As far as Office 365 itself, when Asigra is concerned, we're protecting your Exchange, all of your Exchange profiles, inbox, sent items, deleted items, or anything else you wish to protect, as well as your SharePoint profiles. That will include, of course, the OneDrive and all the documents that you wish to share and make available to internal or external, either inside or outside of your organization. Office 365, of course, is a very easy to learn application. As most of you are already familiar with the general Office applications, this is just added, of course, your Exchange and your SharePoint on the web. Of course, as you know, it has become extremely important. Very large portion of the share, so any company from any size is now able to use the Office solution. Of course, prices become competitive, so any small or medium business size company can use it. It is, of course, the way to go as it's moving away from the on-premises Exchange and SharePoint administration to the cloud, allow you to integrate quickly with the new solutions because it is adapting quickly to anything that is new from Microsoft itself. It is very competitive as far as the price is, and it is moving a lot of companies from the on-premises deployment to the cloud deployment. Now, as you probably know, the actual market penetration is going to grow as we move through the different stages. By 2027, Gartner says there will be 90%, which basically gives you quite a large market to offer the Office 365 functionality as far as the backup and recovery to your customer base. As you know, Office, the Microsoft solution, does have its own retention mechanism. It does protect specific components for a specific period of time. Now, you got to keep in mind, as far as retention, the default is from 14 days to up to 30 days. And for a lot of industries, for a compliance perspective, that is not sufficient. You know, there are verticals that are required to keep data for months or even years. And depending on the vertical, this will definitely not be able to meet compliance objectives, which is one of the main reasons why you need to use a third-party solution to do the backup of the Office 365 Exchange and, of course, the SharePoint. The same parameters actually apply. As far as deleted mailboxes, you'll never be able to recover anything beyond the 30 days. And, of course, with the Asigra solution, you will be able to back up any mailbox, whether it's been deleted or still active. As long as it has been properly backed up, it will be kept on our vault for as long as you wish to keep it. months to years, or whatever your requirements are as far as SLAs with your customers, as far as compliance agreements that you have with your customers. You need to be able to provide a more comprehensive data backup and recovery protection for beyond what Microsoft gives you. Microsoft requirements may be okay for the basic end user or some small business, but as you go out to larger corporations, there are a lot more extensive compliance regulatory requirements. You're going to need to look for another option, which is where Asigra comes in. What can we back up with the Asigra solution? Everything under your Exchange profile. So again, keep in mind both Exchange and SharePoint profiles can be backed up. The Exchange, all the mailboxes, emails, we have folders like deleted folders, sent items, many subfolders under your inbox, as well as any attachments or metadata that you have circulating within your mail, so your Exchange profile. Contacts, calendars, tasks, everything is protected to a very high level from the granularity perspective. You're able to go down to a single item in any one of these general categories. As far as SharePoint, again, the same idea, any document from the specific, the OneDrive as we normally refer to it, which is the documents that are shared on the Microsoft SharePoint Online module. Sites, calendars, of course, contacts, and anything else you want to share, you'll be able to back up with the Asigra solution. The OneDrive, keep in mind, it is a component of the SharePoint personal folders that are going to be showing you during our demo. So what do you need, of course, as the Asigra Office 365 cloud-to-cloud backup recovery solution? So we need, of course, a DS client. Just like all of our backup sets, DS client is the component that will collect the data from any type of item in the customer's LAN or in the WAN for this perspective. As you know, the DS client uses native OS level API, and of course for the Office 365 it is a Windows DS client that will have a plugin installed on it to be able to natively talk to all the cloud-to-cloud components, Office 365 being one of them. The DS client will be able to natively talk to the Office 365 using that API and pick up whatever you choose to back up, whether it's Exchange or SharePoint or one or the other. It's your choice of a backup activity. Keep in mind, the DS client, like normally would do, will bring down the data, collect the data, process the data, encrypt the data, and send it over to the DS system. Now, for the Office 365 best practices, the recommendation is that the DS client and the DS system should be on the same LAN, or at least a very good connection to the DS system for the Office 365 or the Google Apps backup sets, more specifically Office 365, because there's a lot of data to process, and if the DS client brings it down from the WAN, but processes it on the DS client, and then has to transmit it up to the WAN, the productivity and the performance will not be there. So our recommendation is, of course, to put the DS client and the DS system on the same LAN. For the Office 365 backup sets, of course, we have another component that we need extremely important, which is the DS-NOC. The backup sets of Office 365 are only supported if the backup sets are created and pushed out or deployed using the DS-NOC. DS-NOC, it will be running on a Windows machine. From the DS-NOC, we will talk to Office 365, get the complete Exchange and SharePoint profile, and bring them down, and then you can select what you want to back up. And once you select the selected list of backup sets, an XML file is deployed. DS client will pick it up and create all the backup sets that need to be run as far as data protection, whether it's Exchange only or a SharePoint or both. So the main component that you need is DS client, the DS system, and the DS-NOC, normally in the same LAN, will be the recommended practice for the performance and, of course, to make sure you have faster backup and restore activities. As you know, we can have as many DS clients as you want. This one, I definitely recommend the DS client be on the data center side where the DS system is. have one DS client per customer to be able to back up the individual domains that you as an MSP will be protecting. The DS-NOC is the method that we will be creating the different backup sets for both SharePoint and Exchange. From there, the DS-NOC will be regularly talking to the Office 365, detect and advise that there are new users. If there are new users that need to be backed up, you'll be updated on that. It will also tell you when there are users that were initially backed up that are no longer in Office 365, so you can delete them, should you wish to delete them, from the DS-NOC as well as from the DS client itself. So this is a regular connection. DS-NOC talks to Office 365, and at the same frequency the DS client will talk to the DS-NOC on normally every 5 minutes to see if there's anything new. You can reschedule backup sets as often as you want. If there are changes to the schedules, additional users need to be backed up, that is a rescheduling functionality that the DS-NOC will advise the DS client as soon as it connects, which is normally a normal interval of every 5 minutes. As you know, the DS-NOC, single pane of glass for the entire backup and recovery solution, it has a lot more functionality than just for the Office 365. It is a command center, allows you to monitor the different Asigra components, CS system, billing, all the DS clients. Has a real-time backup status window where you know when all the backups have run, whether they run successfully, whether they have had any errors or warnings or did not run. All that is extremely important from the management perspective. And it is, of course, all policy-based access. So the users, when they log on to the DS-NOC, only do and see what the MSP who configured the DS-NOC allows you to do. So it's all permissions-based, but do keep in mind the DS-NOC is mandatory for the Office 365 and Google Apps backup set creation. As far as the Office 365, do keep in mind if you're running into multiple DS clients, running thousands of user profile backup sets, which is, by the way, the recommended implementation as far as the backup set creation is one backup set per Exchange, per user profile, and per SharePoint. So you're going to have hundreds or thousands of backup sets created, which means if you have a lot of DS clients doing these types of backup sets, your backend needs to be, of course, configured in an N+1, because the DS system, as you know, it has to receive every single item that comes in, every single backup set, as well as in the back end do storage optimization, integrity verification, do a lot of other tasks that are related to the performance optimization of the Asigra DS system in the back end. So you want to give the DS system enough nodes to be able to handle all the incoming backups as well as everything else related to the optimization and to management of the back-end environment. As far as the DS client, there is no benefit to going with a grid DS client. The grid will not actually add any performance, since it will still be, as far as Office 365 one DS client, going up with 12 or more, or whatever number of requests. The DS client performance will be enhanced, of course, when you have multiple global admin users given use to run the backup sets. You can have up to 12 global admin users given to each DS client, so they can take advantage of the 12 simultaneous backup activities that you can run from one DS client to the Office 365 portal. From the high availability perspective, of course, the DS client, and again, we're talking about Office 365, the DS client should be on the same LAN as the DS system for all of your Office 365 data protection that you are provisioning. But do keep in mind, by putting them on the same LAN, you are speeding up a lot of the performance activities, because the DS clients don't have to bring the data down and then send it up to the vault. It is going to be, of course, a lot more, a lot faster from the perspective of the performance of the speed of the backups, because we're able to quickly bring them down, and especially with our bulk API, bring down a lot of items and process them quickly at LAN speed to the DS system. We do keep in mind, of course, always think of high availability. Your DS system is, in a way, your single point of failure. So you have to make sure you have a reliable vault, reliable storage, N+1 configuration to address any kind of failure for the purpose of the DS system nodes. But as far as protecting your storage, we always recommend having a DR site, having a replica of your production environment in a DR site. And then basically by having the DR site available, we're able to quickly switch from production environment to DR site in event of a failure of your production. So the idea behind it, of course, is to ensure that you are able to offer 99.9% uptime. And this is, of course, what your customers are expecting in most scenarios. We're talking about Office 365 data. We're talking about Exchange and SharePoint profiles. Those high availability is extremely important. So you should always have the all bases covered as far as your data center, as far as the ability to recover the data from the DR site in the event of a failure of your primary data center. It could be a natural disaster, it could be power failure, it could be any series of situations that could lead to unavailability of your production data center, so the DR site will cover that from that perspective. Asigra has been around for a very long time, and one of the things that it has been very big on, of course, is security and compliance assurance. So the data is encrypted by the DS client, and the DS client can use, of course, up to AES 256, which is a 32 character string. But do keep in mind, not only is the data encrypted by the DS client, and this is not specific to Office 365, it applies to any kind of Asigra backup set. The data will be encrypted by the DS client with up to AES 256. And then, of course, we don't stop there. The data will be encrypted on the source, remain encrypted in flight and at rest. So the data is always encrypted, but we don't stop there. We also encrypt communication between the DS client and, of course, the data center, the DS system. And that, of course, also applies to any communication between any Asigra component. The data is encrypted. The communication session between DS client and DS system is also encrypted with a randomly generated 256-bit encryption key. Every single time a communication session is established between the DS client and the DS system, or as I mentioned, between any Asigra component, is always using an encrypted communication channel. So the data is encrypted, the communication is encrypted, and we use the Asigra proprietary ports that are IANA registered to ensure, of course, no network conflict or any kind of breach. Keep in mind, we're the only FIPS 140-2 cloud certified backup solution, and we are compliant with a lot of different compliant regulatory requirements such as FISMA, HIPAA, and SOX from the regulatory requirements of different verticals of different industries. All right, so next, as far as recommendations for the infrastructure, do keep in mind, every case is a case. These are recommendations based on our test environment and a lot of what our partners being tested on. So do keep in mind that one DS client should never do more than 1,000 backup sets. And this is, of course, assuming that the DS client has these resources to do with 1,000 backup sets, 1,000 Exchange or SharePoint or combination thereof. This is, of course, recommendation. You can have more, obviously, but this is what we've actually worked with. Windows 2012 R2 standard, 64-bit, using a full SQL 2012 SP2 standard, and again, 64-bit. Number of cores and threads, 4 to 8, at least 3 gigahertz speed, and of course, 32 gigs of RAM. Your recommendation, of course, to have an SSD drive for the database for better performance, and of course, about 60 gigs for the operating system hard drive. Again, these are minimum. You could have more, and that will definitely improve the performance. Now, do keep in mind, the next release, we will have an embedded database as part of the DS client, and you'll no longer need to pre-install the full SQL. There will be an option to use Postgres SQL as a database that will give you better cost-saving option as far as the database of choice to be able to run on a Windows DS client. The DS system, as I mentioned, Linux will always give you better performance, as you know. Uses, again, PostgreSQL database. Recommended, before we go any further, an N+1 for our high availability perspective as far as the DS system nodes, and of course the ability to handle more concurrent activities at any given time. Same requirements as far as the number of cores, threads, clock speed, and of course RAM, operating system, database, and of course the backup capacity is whatever number of terabytes you need for that specific DS system to carry out its backup requirements. The database, always the database hard drive, of course, SSD is always the performance. Some people put it into a separate server. Again, performance will be improved if the same server is not acting as both DS system service or daemon as well as the database. And keep in mind, if you are using N+1, a dedicated separate node should be used for the database itself. One way to minimize the number of concurrent activities that you're actually dealing with, which should never exceed 500 concurrent connections, is to make sure your backup sets from the DS client side are properly scheduled. So you don't have all the backup scheduled to start at 6, space them out, start at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on, to spread up the load so not everybody comes in at the same time to the DS system, be able to give you better performance from that perspective. DS-NOC, as I mentioned, it is a requirement for the backup set creation and the push out of all the Exchange and SharePoint profiles that need to be protected. Same requirement as pretty well the DS client, as I mentioned earlier. So Windows 2012 R2 standard, the database, of course, PostgreSQL, cores and threads, the same idea, 4 and 8, clock speed, the RAM, and of course the OS, the database hard drive, SSD, give you better performance, about 500 gigs. The web server, Tomcat 1.8, Java 1.8, Java option as far as memory settings, minimum initial pool 2048, maximum pool, and max metaspace size 8192. Again, the more backup activities are running at any given time, the more connections will be needed to be handled on the DS-NOC. As you know, the DS-NOC is constantly telling the DS, receiving information from all the DS clients that are doing the backup activities. So the number of concurrent connections is extremely important to control as well, because it has the DS-NOC needs to talk to the DS system, needs to receive all the information to update its database from all the DS clients running the Office 365 backup sets. There are a lot of resources available out there, some of them in our documentation that is part of the Asigra DVD. And then, of course, some of them are out in the cloud as far as Microsoft itself. So let me take a look at the Asigra DVD. We have a folder called DS User PDF, and that itself is available with a lot of different notes. Please, we always recommend that you read this before setting up your Office 365 environment. So on page 779, we're talking about the 13.1 SP1 document folder. Recommendation DS clients, DS system setup, and then of course backup and restore. So the various topics that you should really review it. There's no issues. It's always good to read before you proceed with your configured environment. There's knowledge base articles available on the Asigra support portal that usually gives you an idea what the requirements as far as requirements and recommendations, performance recommendations, and of course just performance in general, well documented on the Asigra support portal. And then of course as far as Microsoft, there's a lot of articles as well as the online migration performance and best practices. So this gives you a very high level look at Office 365, the way we should proceed from the perspective of of course, the best way to deploy it and the best practices. So now, before we go into any questions, let me show you how Asigra does the backup. So, as you know, we're able to protect all of your active user profiles The only requirement is whatever user you are going to use to do the backups has to be, of course, a member of the global admin user, and of course the user that you wish to use here needs to be properly licensed with, of course, both the SharePoint and the Exchange licensing, as you can see here. The user has to also be given permissions, both Exchange and SharePoint level permissions. For the Exchange, the user account needs to be members of the Discovery Management and the Organizational Management groups, and you got to make sure they are properly given the authority to run the backup. So as far as Discovery Management, the users that you want to use to run the backup must be all listed here should you wish to use that user to run the backup activities. Same thing applies for Discovery Management, and the Discovery Management role needs to be, you'll have to assign one more role, the application impersonation, and then add the user accounts that you wish to use to run the backup activities of the Exchange. For SharePoint, it's a little more work. What you need to do, of course, on the SharePoint is for every single SharePoint site, you need to run, you can do it with a SharePoint command shell command to actually update every single site to make your user account a site administrator. So you have to make sure the user account that you are using is part of the site administrators group. So every user account that you wish to be running backups with needs to be given permissions on every single site, as you can see there. Okay? So this can be done manually, one site at a time, or you can use the Microsoft SharePoint Online Management Shell. And the SharePoint Online Management Shell allows you to run a script to update the user profiles. So when you launch that, it will allow you to actually create a script with the user account that you wish to give site administrator permissions, and this will go to every single site and apply those permissions. Okay, so once all that is done, then you can go on to the NOC, and again, the NOC is the only supported method of adding a domain or adding a domain both for Google Apps as well as the Office 365. So the first thing you do when you're adding it in, you provide, of course, the name of the DS system, the name of the customer that wishes to have the backup done, the domain name, and then the user account, and then the password. Now, do keep in mind that I've already added it. I'm not going to go to I'm just going to show you that you just click that. At this time, it will validate the user account as far as permissions for all of the Exchange mailboxes, as far as permissions for all the SharePoint mailboxes, and it will populate all the user profiles that you have permissions to back up. So once you add it, this will show up, and this will load whatever number of users you have, the size of the data, number of sites that you can back up, and the size. And then from here, you schedule all the backup sets that you want to create, all the SharePoint sites that you wish to back up, and then the DS client will connect to the DS-NOC, and as I mentioned, it talks to the DS-NOC every 5 minutes. We'll pick up the XML file and we'll deploy all these backup sets, totally automated. Okay. As far as what you can back up, what you can restore, as I mentioned, we back up every single folder that you need to back up, need to protect. As far as what is backed up, let me show you here. So this is what's backed up as part of the Exchange profile. So everything you need to back up, and you can choose what you want to back up. Certain things you don't want to back up, we can actually put in a max exclusion for all the backup sets created from the DS-NOC. We can do a mass exclusion and have that excluded. Like some people will exclude the clutter, will exclude junk mail, will exclude RSS feeds. So certain things can be excluded if you wish. But again, most organizations, everything is backed up and everything can be restored to any granularity you wish. So we're able to drill down to individual folders, individual files, and of course restore file to the original or to an alternate location should you wish to do that for the Exchange. As part of the restore functionality, you can also restore to the disk where you are logged on to the DS client from. SharePoint, same idea as far as what you can back up, what you can restore. Everything can be backed up that you have. Okay, so as far as the user profile here, so we're able to restore and back up everything. For those of you that weren't in the OneDrive, this is the OneDrive that we're backing up. It is a folder under the SharePoint personal site. So all of your files, all your share files will be here under the documents. So we're able to back up and restore any document, any item, any site that you have protected. Okay, at this stage, I guess we'll open the floor. Are there any questions? And I'll bring in Nathan. How does that work with the questions?
Hi, Jose. Thank you. So there is one question that has been posted. The question is, when will the DS client SP containing embedded PostgreSQL DB be released?
That's based on what I was told, the first quarter of next year it should be available. We are presently testing it. It is working. There's, of course, a procedure that normally we go through as far as, making sure we go through all the testing, all the functionality, that there's no alteration. But, yeah, but it's going to be available first quarter. Could be we always aim for the beginning, but we don't know. There could be there's always surprises, and we want to make sure we don't commit to anything we cannot fulfill. But it will be available at the beginning of the year.
Thank you. And the other question that we received was, for restore of a email, can we perform an advanced lookup such as finding the sender address or time?
No, you got to keep in mind as far as the restore. Let me show the screen again. The email restore. If you know something that you're looking for example, inside the inbox, if you're looking for something very specific, it could be like, for example, a PDF file. We can find it. If there is a specific path, we can actually look at that. Now, as far as looking up a sender, not yet. Not yet. It is something that people have asked. We're only able to give you times when the backups have run, what we backed up, but we are not able to drill down at this stage yet from the backup set perspective from the users. Now, if you know that there's specific files, yeah, you really, the concept of find a file is a file type. Subject lines are here, so you're able to find the subject line. As far as the from field, no, we don't actually allow you to filter by that at this stage. So again, if the customer needs that kind of functionality, definitely you're welcome to put in a feature request, and do keep in mind any feature request you put in should enable voting on it. The more people vote on these feature requests, the quicker it makes it to a project because it goes directly to our engineering head. So if this is a functionality that you think is important, Normally, people bring back data from a specific time frame. You have the ability to do that. If there's a specific time you wish to go back to, you can actually go back to a specific section when the backup run, and that normally allows you enough control from that perspective. As far as the narrowing down to a specific user account, yeah, unless you actually know the subject line, you can probably find it that way. Finding files, like for example, if I want to find an email with Jose's name on it, it allows you to a next window, and here you're allowed to search by subject, okay, so which is the next level. So there is a two-step procedure. You can put in anything on the first window, and then allows you to go back into the backup files and look at specific criteria. And this is probably what the customer is looking for, I assume. But you got to keep in mind, from here, you will not be able to get anything because this will not give you any information from this window. But this will take you to a step 2. And here you can search by specific criteria. Email messages, subject line, to, from, where we're able to drill down to the ones with, with specific criteria, contacts, or anything so very specific that you're looking for. So it is going to be a two-step. In the, I've been asked in the past, it should be here on the first window, an option to put in all the criteria, but you have to do it in a stage 2, a second step, and put it this way. And this, I think, will cover what your customer is looking for, but you got to keep in mind, you have to know the exact email address that it's coming from. You know, the wildcards, I've been told, may not be too effective, but you can try that as well.
Okay, thanks, Jose. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for questions today. There were a couple questions that went unanswered, so if you would like some more information about those questions, or if you'd like an answer to those questions, feel free to talk to your Asigra representative, or you can send them to marketing@asigra.com. And also, as mentioned earlier, this webinar has been recorded, and it will be published in our partner portal tomorrow so that you can take another look. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and we hope that you have a great day.